There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch. Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon. As long as we've been covering this case, we were all obviously thrilled when an arrest was made. However, this case has been open for in excess of, well, say 12 to 13 years. And during that time, expectations of the public have been high and been low, and been at the point where they thought that there might never be an arrest in this case. And it's a scary case because of all the young women that were involved in this case. People looked into it as if, could this be their daughter? Who is this madman out there that's taking women off the street and dumping them by a beach called Gilgo Beach? And that's what was most disconcerting to people. So Mr. Heuermann's arrest last month came soon after a task force was formed that examined every element of this case, and investigators focused upon collecting and retesting DNA evidence as well as cell phone records. The three women that Mr. Heuermann is accused of killing have been contacted by several different burner phones from two locations near his home on First Avenue in Massapequa Park, and near his office at Fifth Avenue and 36th Street in Manhattan, that would eventually link him to the crimes. We have on the screen what is known as the Gilgo Four: the Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. Since this case has become public, details about Mr. Heuermann have surfaced. People from his high school have been interviewed. He went to Berner High School in Massapequa. The fact that he was a business owner in Manhattan, had his own architectural firm, even his financial well-being or lack of well-being, the fact that he owed a lot of money to the IRS. All of this thing has been out there. The fact that he had a mean streak. Last month, of course, prosecutors and the police called him a sadistic killer who liked perverse pornography, who kept an arsenal of weapons in his basement vault. Everyone now, instead of saying, oh, all our questions are answered, it seems many people have way more questions now. Did Rex Heuermann act alone? Did he have an accomplice? If so, who? Are the police holding this information back? Do they know the answers to these questions? After all, folks, if you know the criminal justice system, when someone is arrested, the police naturally ask them if they would like to make a statement. In this instance, Rex Heuermann immediately sought counsel. Once you seek counsel, the police are not allowed to speak to you anymore. That's not well known by people. People think that the police can just talk to you. That is not true. If you invoke your right to counsel, all interviews are over. And one of the things about this task force that I really liked is that they are thinking outside the box, and not just thinking outside the box, but they're working outside and within the box. A new team of investigators, and they've utilized all different types of investigative resources, which have included, of course, the FBI, the Suffolk County DA's office, the state police, the Suffolk County detectives, and of course the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, which is an unusual partner to bring into a case like this. But no doubt, based on the video I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes, definitely paid dividends and may continue to pay dividends in this case in regards to some of the female sex workers who are working in this case, who may have had encounters with Rex Heuermann before. This is an invaluable source of information, an investigative resource that maybe perhaps wasn't thought of before. But bringing in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, I think, was a stroke of genius. And I think they've really helped in this investigation. Let's listen to a bit of this.
Part of the Gilgo Beach serial murder case we have not seen or talked about before.
It is the human trafficking unit of Suffolk County Police Department that has in fact identified some of the young women linked to the accused killer, Rex Heuermann.
Sex workers, that's the politically correct term. But the truth is, some of them are young women caught up in a human trafficking ring. Here's Long Island reporter Shantae Lands.
Thousands of women have been incarcerated inside 2 jails in Suffolk County. It's a dark time for many, but a chance to identify and help victims of human trafficking.
We've been able to identify 315 victims and 192 traffickers.
Investigative Sergeant Aaron Menkel heads the human trafficking unit.
They may have been a sex worker making their own money, and sometimes the trafficker will then prey upon that. Sometimes the traffickers will get them initiated in the trade.
The unit is comprised of all women, 3 female correctional officers in constant search of the signs.
While they're here, our Sadie investigators walk through daily, checking in on them, seeing whatever in-custody support we can give. And then by the end of the week, they take them out and do a one-on-one interview with everyone.
Slowly gaining their trust, even identifying several sex workers who encountered accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann.
We had reached out to them for sex. Fortunately for these 2 women, they took the calls but did not meet with him.
Sheriff Errol Toulon launched the unit in 2018.
Did you ever think that your human trafficking unit would help in the Gilgo Beach investigation?
You know, when we first created this in 2018, we started to try and formulate some questions without knowing anything because there was no task force. But then once the task force was created, it really helped.
Heuermann is housed in Suffolk Jail. The architect and father of 2 pleaded not guilty to the 3 murders. He remains on suicide watch.
So our mental health staff will be evaluating him, most recently because he just had a court date yesterday to make sure that he's still okay.
Rex Heuermann is staying in a single cell just like this one. Nothing but a toilet, sink, window, and a bed. No visits from Heuermann's family, just his attorney, but others have tried.
There have been some journalists and some other individuals that he's refused to actually see.
Did he know those individuals?
That I do not know, whether he knows them or not, but he refused the visits.
Meaningful work for Sergeant Menkel.
So many women have told us that jail has actually saved their lives.
Outstanding work. I really like that Sheriff Toulon. He's a very humble guy, very soft-spoken guy, and the information that you can get from inside a jail or inside a prison is just invaluable. People looking to cut deals, shave time off their sentences, people that just want to do the right thing and give the police an investigation like this information. Look, they got information that 2 of the women housed in that facility had contacts with Rex Heuermann. That information in itself is incredible because now they have somewhere to go. They obviously have other evidence, but he contacted them probably very recently. So it helps to build the case. It's like, as the case progresses, it proceeds, you hear people saying, oh, maybe he's not the guy. I mean, you always hear that. But it's very important to build the case and build as much evidence as you can possibly put on this guy. This guy is you don't get any worse than being a serial killer. And that's for sure.
Gilgo Beach murders investigation. We have learned the wife of the suspect, Rex Heuermann, has spoken to him since his arrest.
Meanwhile, neighbors say they're trying to return to normal. CBS 2's Jennifer McLogan reports from Massapequa Park.
Etienne de Villiers took a deep breath. A box addressed to his neighbor, the accused serial killer, landed on de Villiers' porch, and he needed to deliver it to Asa Ellerup, the estranged wife of Rex Heuermann.
She's a neighbor. You know, you got to do what you can. You have no idea. The kids don't deserve this. They're nice kids.
a bird feeder, plant, and basket of flowers amid a cardboard box with yellow evidence tape, reminders of the massive police presence, now replaced by one squad car. The Heuermann children, daughter Victoria and stepson Christopher, have hired a lawyer.
Chris, I spoke to the other day, and the first words out of his mouth were, I don't think my father did this.
We learned the family plans to stay in the home for at least several months. Ellerup shared photos she took, claiming investigators left behind uninhabitable conditions. Ellerup directed all questions to her attorney, Robert Macedonio, who tells us his client has not been interviewed by investigators, but has spoken to her husband by telephone in several, quote, personal conversations. Prosecutors said there was no indication the family had any knowledge of the suspected crimes. He was told at his Tuesday conference to be back in court September 27th. He's held without bail.
The press has convicted my client without seeing a shred of evidence.
What is the scope of Heuermann's alleged crimes? Accused of killing and wrapping his victims in burlap, leaving bodies at Gilgo Beach. Was he leading a double life?
Rex Heuermann, I'm an architect, I'm an architectural consultant, I'm a troubleshooter.
We know that once somebody becomes a serial killer, that takes practice. And practice means there had to be other murders that occurred where they're learning their trade. They're learning how to become serial killers.
Some neighbors say they're numb knowing they lived near someone with a walk-in vault for hundreds of weapons, accused of unspeakable horrors.
Surrounded by something like that, and we could be involved in something like that. It's tough to be a part of.
From Massapequa Park, Long Island, Jennifer.
So obviously, we feel bad for the family. I don't think anyone believes, including the police, who are the investigators in this, believe that the family had anything to do with it. However, I had mentioned on numerous shows, I can't believe that they had this normal father knows best life. I think that he had to show signs of really aberrant behavior. And the family potentially, the wife could be what's known as a battered wife. And even if it wasn't being physically battered, emotionally battered, he doesn't seem like a soft, warm, fuzzy guy, and obviously he's not. But, still the family doesn't deserve this. And a lot of people ask questions about, the police in the search warrant over 12 days, 13 days, basically wrecking the inside of the house. Well, I'm going to tell you this, never do the police ever clean up after a search warrant. Now, the family does have some recourse, and that is to sue the police department to have their home returned to normalcy. Things that were broken, the police department would pay to fix. Walls potentially that were knocked down or broken into the bathtub. You could see they cut out a section of the bathtub. Yes, the police would be required to pay for that. However, people think that the police do search warrants and they clean up. No. There's no police cleanup unit. And you could think whatever you want to think. Oh, that's horrible. Okay, yeah, it is. But that's the way it is. And again, as I said, the recourse would be for the wife to sue the police department for damages encountered in this search. A lot of people also want to know right now, where did Rex Heuermann commit these murders? By that, I mean, was it inside his house? Was it inside his vehicle? Was it at another location? Potentially, since his wife was away during all of the Gilgo 4, potentially it could happen in his house, but I think the most likely scenario for that is inside his vehicle. Therefore, the search of that vehicle, the potential recovery of hair, fibers, DNA, even after 12 years, is a real potentiality. And if they can recover that type of trace evidence and connect it, and that's why, a lot of folks asked, how did Rex Heuermann's wife, how did her hair get on 3 of the victims' bodies? And that's something called transfer evidence. We don't believe his wife had anything to do with this, but Rex lives in the same home as her. Potentially, she drives in his car. Her hair, we all lose hair over the course of a day. We speak about Locard's principle of exchange. And when someone goes into a crime scene, they bring something from the outside world with them. For example, your hair, or in this case, Rex Heuermann could have had his wife's hair on his clothing, or on the burlap bags he used to wrap the bodies in, or on the tape. So that is potentially how the wife's hair got there. So that's called transfer evidence. And it went with Rex Heuermann wherever he went. So everyone is wanting to guess, where did these murders take place? Did it take place inside the home in Massapequa Park? Did it take place inside the vehicle? Or did it take place at another location? Well, that is part of the huge job of the Suffolk County Police Department, the detectives, the FBI, is to try to find out where. And, the intelligence they garnered from the sheriff's department in talking to some of these sex workers could be invaluable. And I don't want to get graphic, but, the sex act could have taken place inside his vehicle, which would give a good indication that perhaps so did the murders. So those are some of the things that we have. And that's why the intelligence, the interviewing, the interrogation of people to get information, especially now, even more so than before, is so important. And again, Sheriff Toulon, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, invaluable with talking to these people that perhaps got sex trafficked and are in the Suffolk County Jail. Perhaps interview sex traffickers who potentially could be facing a lot of time. That's when the old show, Let's Make a Deal. Tell us this. You give us good information on that, and we'll cut your sentence in half. Or we'll cut it down. We'll see if we can work with you. So this is all part of investigation. And then, of course, we talk about connecting the dots to different cases. Already they were able to determine that Rex Heuermann is not a suspect in the Jersey serial killings, the ones near Atlantic City. They could potentially have DNA on that, and it doesn't match a Rex Heuermann, and that could have almost immediately cleared him, or could be a different modus operandi. And what does that mean? Well, the method of operation. The perpetrator there could use a totally different method of operation, which includes the cause, the method, and the cause of death. We don't know what the causes were. In the Gilgo Beach slayings, they're all saying they're strangulation or asphyxia. And in Shannon Gilbert's case, she had a broken hyoid bone, which is indicative, it's the bone right down here, which is indicative of strangulation. So those are some of the things that they find out during autopsy. And that's why this investigation, again, is still super active and super important. Maureen Brainard Barnes, who is the fourth of the Gilgo Four. There she is, the picture over there. They still haven't charged anyone with her murder. And we believe that the Suffolk County Police, the Suffolk County DA, the FBI, the Sheriff's Department, the state police, they're building a stronger case so that they can include that case as the Gilgo Four, the fourth person that was a victim of Rex Heuermann.
To do that on a rolling basis. And, this case, the charge in the indictment are just allegations. So this is the first step in the process of proving those allegations. So we look forward to undertaking that process. We've spoken to the victims. The victims are not going to be making any, they've elected not to make any statements at this to the media at this time. They want to maintain their privacy. They are obviously interested in the case, but they're not going to be speaking to the media. So that's about it.
Let's bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson joining us live tonight outside the courthouse in Suffolk County, Long Island, New York, inside the courtroom today. Matt, great to see you tonight. Tell us about today's hearing.
Well, this obviously was from the other day, and I actually don't think we really need to hear this again, because we know what happened in court, and during court that day, it was a great deal of administrative function. It was only an 8-minute hearing. They picked another date, September 27th, for the next court date. They also made plans to give all or most, or well, they said on a continual basis, giving the defense the discovery material. So this discovery material is, as we use the word, voluminous. There's a huge amount of it. It's not only documentary evidence, but it's also digital evidence, which the defense will have to pour through. Some of the things we saw in regards to Rex Heuermann's searches on his computer were deeply disturbing. The things that you would expect a serial killer to be searching. And I don't want to get into the graphic nature of it. Just be advised that he was searching child porn and many other pornographic sites of a violent nature. So all of those things will go to building who is Rex Heuermann, you know. And I know a lot of people, we all say a defendant is innocent to proven guilty. After all, that's our system. But when you see some of the evidence that they have against him, and I'm not saying nothing is ever slam dunk, nothing is ever, a jury is always unpredictable. You never know what a jury is going to do. Therefore, you can't say, oh, this is a slam dunk case. It's certainly not a slam dunk case. I don't think there is such thing as a slam dunk case. The court TV went back to Gilgo today to sort of more or less, everyone's interested in seeing, oh, they hear so much about Gilgo Beach. What does it look like? What is it like at nighttime? If you've ever been out on the water or near the water at nighttime where there's very little light, that is the definition of pitch blackness, of darkness, being near the water or the ocean at nighttime, where the only light there is the light of the moon. And that's what Gilgo Beach area is like at nighttime. Here's a reporter from Court TV talking about the location this afternoon.
This is where a gruesome discovery took place. Off the water here, 4 victims were discovered, wrapped in burlap, badly decomposed. Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, known as the Gilgo 4 because of the proximity to Gilgo Beach. Now, to show you where, in relation to where the next body was found, to the Gilgo 4, we have to get behind the wheel. We're still on Ocean Parkway. We're going to drive down this stretch of road along the water here and the beach. And it's in around, I would say about a quarter of a mile. Around this area is where the body of an Asian man was located, still unidentified, dressed in women's clothing. Now, about a mile from where the Gilgo 4 were located, still along Ocean Parkway here, this stretch of beach is where the body of Jessica Taylor was discovered. Still along the same stretch of roadway, about a year later and 5 miles from the Gilgo 4 were located, along here, Jones Beach area, the remains of 2 others are found, a toddler yet to be identified, and the remains of Valerie Mack.
And Matt Johnson joining us live tonight from Gilgo Beach. Matt, great to see you. Okay, I want to dig a little deeper into this tour that you just took us on of the area. And the first thing that strikes me is this is a highway. This is a park. I mean, there are cars.
You know, folks, that's what many people are arguing over. How did he get the victims to that location? And I think from my experience as a police officer, police sergeant, and investigator, it's pretty obvious. He drove them there. pitch black at night, could turn off his lights, no one could even see him, and he dumped the bodies. People that are conjecturing that he took a duck boat, I don't get that. That is just, it allows too much exposure for the perpetrator. And anything that a perpetrator doesn't want is exposure. So what is so hard to understand that he drove them there? And that's why I think it also lends a lot of credence to the possibility that he killed these girls inside his vehicle. I think that's a very good possibility. And there's also a possibility that he killed them in his home and then put them inside his vehicle under the cover of darkness and drove the half hour or the 35 minutes to Gilgo Beach and dumped the bodies there. Now, certain things about this case are also disturbing. Well, there's everything about this case is disturbing, but how about the Asian male who was dressed like a woman? Could have that person also been a sex worker that Rex Heuermann called using his burner phone? I think absolutely. Does that go outside his modus operandi a little bit? Yeah, it does. Maybe he didn't know that it was a male dressed in women's clothing. Possibility. And then the toddler, and I believe a woman named Peaches, they've compared the DNA, and she was the mother, her body and the toddler's body. So as we said, the toddler could have been what they would call, and it's a horrible expression, peripheral damage, that the toddler may have just been with the mother. Now, but there certainly is no certainty that Rex Heuermann committed all these murders. There's no certainty that he committed the 3 that he's being charged for right now, although the evidence on those is the strongest right now. However, there's another six bodies that they haven't connected to him. Well, not officially, but that's what the Gilgo Task Force will be working on, connecting the evidence, to transfer evidence, possibility transfer. And now, of course, they have people to interview. Always the toughest to solve cases where the victims are not identified. So that's what's going to be the challenge to this Gilgo Task Force.
Cars going by. I understand it's summertime, more people heading towards the beach areas, but this is a busy, well-traveled road. Question: in order to deposit a body in this area, you would pull over like you did, and you'd be in sight of cars driving past you, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, Vinny, good evening to you. And that was what was on our minds today. We noticed a few things, that it was very busy stretch of roadway. But 13 years ago, I was on the other side of the road where these bodies were found. So 13 years ago, there were no bike path, and there would have been fewer pedestrians and fewer people. There's also no street lights, completely black, pitch black in this area. Very different than this stretch of beach where I'm at right now, Gilgo Beach. Further down, about a 5-10 minute drive is where those victims' bodies were found, again in burlap, badly decomposed. And it's a very eerie, ominous place to be. It's very overgrown, it's marshy, there's reeds out in the water there, and it's just, you don't expect you would see anybody there, and you don't expect that anything would be found there if you were to look.
So here's what I'm trying to piece together, right? If you're going to do this in the middle of the night, no lights, right? You're going to need a flashlight.
Right.
I mean, you're going to need light to see where you're actually going, because you're walking through what? Overgrown marshes?
And that's exactly why a lot of people suspect that maybe the killer used a boat, or maybe
That's to me, that's ridiculous that he used a boat. And it would give you, again, way too much exposure. What's so hard to understand that he pulled over, no flashlight either, no killer that's trying to remain anonymous and not get caught is going to pull out a flashlight. He knows the area already. He's already reconned the area. He's just going to simply grab the body, and the bodies were like 35 or 40 feet from the road. What's so hard to understand that? That's potentially what he did, not turn on a flashlight, which people could see from a long distance away. He wants an anonymity, and doesn't want anyone to see him. He pulls off the road, grabs the body. It's already packed in whatever, in the camouflage bags and burlap bags, and he's dumping the body. What's so hard to understand about that?
Maybe a different way of transportation. But everything is very close when you're talking about the prime suspect, the person that prosecutors say is behind these 3 deaths of the Gilgo 4 and the suspect in the 4th, because I want to put a map up on your screen right there, and we can show the relation to where Rex Heuermann's home there in Massapequa is located across the waterway from this beach and this remote area, this stretch near the highway where these 4 bodies were found. If you keep driving a little bit, not too far from there, that's Amityville. And that's where the storage unit that Rex Heuermann rented was searched by police. Short drive from there, that's the causeway. It takes you over.
You know, folks, I think this map gives you a pretty good idea. And it's where the road is, and it's on where he dumped the bodies is on the ocean side, not on the bay side, which if he took a boat, he would have to stop by the bay side, walk across the marsh, across the other part of the highway, and dump the bodies that way. I think that's highly, highly unlikely that he did it that way.
Over a bridge and then over to Ocean, the highway here, where off that is where these 4 victims that we're focusing on here was located. So it's all relatively very close, Vinny. Middle of the night, there's no lights, there's no street lights. Back 13 years ago, 10 years ago, you were able to pull off right near where these bodies were located.
Okay, so you can pull off close there. If you pulled off in that area, would you be seen by anyone who would be driving down the road? And I understand in the winter, you're not going to have as many people in the beach area, right? And in the middle of the night, you're not going to have as many people. But when, troopers and other folks are just driving down the road and you see someone pulled over in the middle of the night, you're going to stop. It seems pretty risky. Would it be risky? Would you be spotted where you'd have to park in order to get off the road and get to where you're depositing these bodies?
I think that it is risky because, again, remember, police took into custody and they're searching through his truck. It was a larger truck that Rex Heuermann had. If you assume that he used that, if he is, in fact, the killer and deposited these bodies over there. But you would think that someone would see something, but in the middle of the night, in winter, you might not see anything. There is.
You know, folks, the people that are, and I'm just explaining this, you have your every right to your opinion. People that are saying he may have used the boat, think of the exposure. He'd have to drive to the boat, take the body out of his car, right? Now, drive the boat across the bay to the marshy area, pick up the body where he pulled the boat over, walk across the marsh and across a highway, and then dump the body and then return trip. It's just way, way too much exposure, in my opinion. And folks, you have every right to believe whatever you want to believe, but I think it's a little, to me, it's a little far-fetched that he would have used that method to do it. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you want to subscribe to us, we have a YouTube. You can go on our YouTube site and give us a thumbs up and hit that like button. And we love our fans and our subscribers. We also have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with over 5 different levels. So please subscribe to our Police Off the Cuff channel, and you won't be sorry. Let's go back to the court TV people.
No lights out here.
Right.
Very remote.
But you're gonna have to illuminate the area so you can see where you're going and what you're doing. So either your car lights are gonna be on, or you're gonna need a flashlight. You're gonna need something in order to do.
You know, folks, if he reconned, and again, if he did dry runs of this, he would be able to turn his car lights off, pull off into the weeds where virtually no one would see him. And he would have that kind of confidence because he knows the area. Someone pointed it out in the chat that when Rex Heuermann was a teenager, he worked at Jones Beach. This area of Gilgo is east of Jones Beach. So he knows the area. He's a Long Island boy. He grew up around this. So yes. And he became, if he is the serial killer we all believe he became, then he thinks things out. He plans things. He's an organized offender. He's what we would call an organized offender. So I think that they're stressing on, oh, it's light. Did he have his lights on? There's no lights in that area. It's pitch black. So if you want to be stealthily and not be caught, you turn off your lights. When I was in anti-crime, and anyone that's ever worked anti-crime in the New York City Police Department, when you come to work to dress in dark clothing. You never wear bright clothing because guess what? You dress like the perp because you want to blend in with the night. In fact, the old street crime unit, their motto was, "We own the night," because they wanted to be out there and blend in and not have people make them and pick them out as cops. The same thing in reverse with Rex Heuermann. He doesn't want to be picked out as a perpetrator, or what are you doing there? So no doubt he used his criminal mind in the easiest way not to get caught.
Do this whole thing. And I understand you could do it and no one would come by, which is obviously, I guess, what happened here. But it just seems risky because it's not just one body. It's not just two. It's like 3. It's 4. Potential of 11 bodies that could have been discarded in that area. Okay, so you're in Gilgo tonight. What are folks saying out there? What are the people of Gilgo Beach? Because it looks like Gilgo Beach is like a regular beach, right? In the summertime, it's a place where people go to hang at the beach, go in the water.
Right, everybody's having a good time. They're bringing their families out here. It's kind of a locals place. I'm facing the sign that faces the actual Gilgo Beach, where it faces the Atlantic. It's very sandy. It's great. There are people out there, doing bonfires right now, drinking some wine as the sun set. Earlier today, it was a lot of, people playing volleyball and having a good time. But again, this is about 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from where these bodies were located, in a very different area where it's all marshy, overgrown, and just kind of uncomfortable place to be, especially with all the bugs. But today, everyone really talking about the case. This has haunted this community for more than 10 years. Most people telling us that they never thought that they would see an arrest in the case. A lot of people still wondering if there's going to be another arrest. Maybe someone else, maybe there's multiple serial killers, because you have some of the bodies found with Gilgo 4 that were in the burlap and they were also bound. And then you have some of other bodies in the 11 found in this area that were dismembered. But we were talking about it with locals today. Take a listen.
It's horrifying, actually. It's like, I just been coming here for years. I was here during those times. Very scary, very scary.
Why was it so scary? There was bodies being discovered. Were you in fear that they wouldn't make any arrests, that these would go unsolved? What was...
Unsolved. That, for years and years and years, you never heard anything else about it. And somebody was out there doing all these horrible things. So I'm shaking right now.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's great that they apprehended the guy. I mean, I'm sure people that live around here full time, makes them feel a little bit easier knowing that the guy's off the streets and stuff like that.
Did you hear that? That lady said that she was shaking, not because she was on camera afraid to talk to us, but just because, just the fear over this case in this community over the decade when they didn't really have any answers. And they say that they're still searching for answers, Vinny. They still don't know if there's another killer or an accomplice out there. Again, I went over the differences in some of those remains that were found and some of the victims in this area. They're also wondering, they're thinking about the victims' families and how they're holding up. And then we have all of the victims that haven't been identified in this area.
So let's get away from the Gilgo 4 for a second and get to those other bodies, right? Because the Gilgo 4 are wrapped in burlap and handled one particular way. But with the
folks, one of the things that the police are going to do, and obviously these broadcasters aren't police personnel. They do what's called linkage, and they try to link the cases together with very specific things. Of course, number one would be DNA. Number two would be signature. And we spoke about apparently Rex Heuermann's signature was using these camouflage burlap bags. That's part of his signature. Linkage by what were most of these women? They were sex workers. Is that a link? You bet it is. Because in his MO, he's targeting a specific type of woman. And then we have the burner phones, more linkage. So I just listed 4 things. Number 5, the location. Is the location part of the linkage that I'm speaking about? You bet. Because what does that usually tell you, the linkage? It tells you that the person doing this lives in a close proximity to where these bodies are being dumped. And there was no doubt that that was the case. And he lives in Massapequa Park. I mean, we know that now. So very simple to say this. And then, of course, you would have, years ago, I believe the FBI profiled who they thought the Gilgo murderer was. And it was very close, not in a physical description, but in a mental and an MO and a job and a organized offender type thing. It was very close. And there's not always, profilers are not always that accurate as they were with this case. We look at the case of the Beltway sniper, Muhammad and Malvo. The FBI was way, way off on that case. They said the shooter was a male white in his late 30s. It was a male black 17 and a middle-aged male black like 35. So they're not always good at predicting in profiling. In this case, they happen to be pretty damn accurate. And so all of those things, again, is called case linkage.
Area, like, why didn't people discover them? Are they also in like marshlands? Are they actually on the beach? Are they in an area where no one would have been walking? Because some of those bodies were there for years.
Right. Some of them were legs that were discovered over at Fire Island. You had another area where just a head, a skull was discovered. Other remains were skeletal. So I think that we're dealing with a situation of, with the waterways, was some of the remains moved? Perhaps maybe with the water or over time, some of the remains were the sand was taken off, removed that way just by the elements, or maybe animals moved some of the remains, some of the victims' remains. I think that, we have a lot of scenarios that some experts and anthropologists are going over right now. And that's pretty important as well, because in this massive treasure trove of mountain of evidence, the prosecutors in discovery passed over yesterday to defense attorneys. It's sensitive photos of the crime scene that was handed over, along with anthropological findings, those reports and autopsy reports, at least for these 3 victims that Rex Heuermann is charged with.
So, so as soon as they started searching, right, they were looking for Shannon Gilbert, all of a sudden they're finding all these bodies. So they're not like hidden in a place where it's super difficult to find, but I guess it was just a matter of an area that's just not trafficked.
I think that one of the things a perpetrator, a serial killer, gets comfortable, and that is all part of MO, gets comfortable with a location where he has gotten away with dumping a body in the past and stays with that location. And I think that can explain why the bodies known as the Gilgo 4 were found in really close proximity to each other. So Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman, they were all found within 30 or 40 feet of each other. So to me, that says more about, the modus operandi and the personality of the serial killer, that he's comfortable in that area. So he stays within his comfort zone and returns to that same location. There's also potentially a psychosexual explanation for that. The serial killer probably gets excited going back to that location to relive what he has done. And that is very common with serial killers, going back. He may have even gone back on other days when he didn't, in fact, kill anyone, just to relive the crime and the location. So I think you can explain this from a forensic psychological perspective, that it's part of his personality, that he feels very comfortable going back to this location.
By people, right? It's not where you are tonight. You're at Gilgo. There's an entrance. There's a sign. This is off the beaten path. You wouldn't go there to go, surfing or sunbathing, right? It's sort of almost like still kind of in the wild, and there aren't houses there. Is that the picture that you're painting for me tonight?
Gilgo, it's funny that he said that. Gilgo happens to be a surfer's beach, and a lot of surfers do go to Gilgo. Of course, most people are not going to surf at night. Pretty dangerous to surf at night. But some of these beaches out there also, you can go on with a four-wheel drive if you have a state permit. But he's mentioning surfing. Yeah, Gilgo was or is a beach where a lot of surfers go to surf. And again, probably not at nighttime.
That's the perfect picture to paint here, Vinny, because there is sporadic, housing developments here and there. You don't really see them off the highway. But 10 years ago, there was no path. You wouldn't see people on bikes. You wouldn't see people jogging. It's overgrown. It's uncomfortable. There's, overgrown bushes with stickers. There's a lot of bugs in the area. You wouldn't go to these areas. So you wouldn't be searching those areas unless you had a reason to. And I think that that's where all of this comes together with the search for Shannon, and that's the reason why those remains were discovered after people started to think that maybe she was there. So, and then that led people to search in other areas along this Ocean Parkway.
And now tying it back to the suspect here, if he's from the area, he would know very well, this is an area where nobody really goes, right? So it would have to be someone with some of that sort of knowledge, right?
It's not just an area that no one goes, and especially at nighttime. But it's an area, and I repeated this before, that Rex Heuermann knows very well. He worked at Jones Beach as a teenager. This Gilgo Beach is east of Jones Beach, maybe 10 miles, 15 miles east of Jones Beach, but it's on the same road. So yeah, he's a Long Island boy, born and bred on Long Island. He knows all about these locations. When I was a young lad, I used to go out to Captree, which is actually past Gilgo Beach, and that's where all the fishing boats were. And if you wanted to go out fishing, you would drive past Gilgo to Captree, which is the very end of this road of Ocean Parkway, and that's where the fishing boats were. And then there's also the Fire Island Bridge, a bridge going over to Fire Island. So I'm sure he knows this area quite well because he is a Long Island boy and he grew up out there.
Here's an area people really don't go. This is a good place for me to deposit these bodies, these victims, because unless you're looking for them, you're not going to find them.
Exactly. He grew up in the area. He lived in that Massapequa home for so long. And, I do have to say, there was some speculation, some reporting that I had, just been following and watching. And some people were wondering whether or not his home had a line of sight to this beach area or the beach area where the victims' bodies were found. And I have to tell you no, because his home is a single-story home, as we know. It's surrounded by houses, and there is no beach view there. But it is just a short drive to where we were today.
All right. Anything else that you noticed today, Matt, that you want folks to know about? I mean, to me, it's eye-opening. It's really, really eye-opening seeing the highway, but then, like, if it's the middle of the night, it's the middle of the winter, nobody's going to be there. And nobody would have found if they weren't looking. Anything else that you came across today and you're like, oh, here we go?
Well, no, I think that that's it, right? I think the two big takeaways from Court TV's investigation and our visits today is how remote and unsuspecting and how difficult these locations are to get to. That's number one. And then number two, you know, I just can't say it enough, like this community in Long Island, everybody is impacted by this story so much. And it's really palpable, you know, when you talk to people about how much fear people had for the past 10 years of not having answers, and they're hoping to get some now.
All right, Matt Johnson, Court TV.
So very, very interesting, you know, especially for you folks that aren't from this area, to see what Gilgo Beach looks like. All you know is you hear that name, Gilgo Beach. Oh, strange name. But then you get to see it. And it's actually quite a beautiful place during the daytime. And you know, at nighttime, as reported by the Law and Crime Channel, no one goes there. What reason would you have to go there late at night? So a perfect place for a serial killer to dump a body? You bet. Especially a serial killer that knows his way around Long Island, is from an area that's 35 minutes away. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but he's comfortable. He's comfortable in that area. He's a Long Island boy. He grew up out there. He knows his way around. He probably had it rehearsed that if he dumped a body and a state trooper came by and asked him what he was doing there, he probably had an alibi all ready to explain what he was doing there in his big Chevrolet Avalanche, you know, because this is how serial killers think. They think 10 moves ahead. They're playing chess, right? They think ahead, and there's a good chance, as I said, there's such a great chance that he took them there, obviously in his vehicle, and potentially killed them in his vehicle. That hasn't really been discussed that much, but I think there's really a good potentiality that that's the case. Some folks want to say he killed them in his house. That's also a possibility. I'm not going to deny that. That's a distinct possibility. But I don't think we can just give away the possibility that he potentially killed them in his vehicle and then just drove to Gilgo with the bodies. I think that's a distinct possibility. And, you know, again, I think Duty Run tonight is going to talk about the evidence in the vehicle and the potentiality that could evidence be in that Chevrolet Avalanche 12, 13 years from the time that these crimes occurred. And the answer is yes, there could still be trace evidence in that car. Isn't that amazing to think that? There could still potentially be trace evidence. And if they recover that 12, 13 years later, it's just amazing. But there is the potentiality that they could recover this trace evidence.
The investigation into the Long Island serial killer began as a search for a missing woman named Shannon Gilbert. Instead of finding Shannon, law enforcement came across body after body after body on a strip of beach in Long Island. It began with the Gilgo 4, then more victims, eventually totaling 10 until Shannon's remains were finally found. Tonight, we return to the scene where those bodies were discovered 13 years ago.
In December of 2010, authorities make a grim and gruesome discovery along the sandy shore here near Gilgo Beach. The bodies of 4 women badly decomposed and wrapped in burlap. Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, known as the Gilgo 4.
Then we'll bring in our experts to look at 2 significant questions in this case which have not been answered. Where were these victims murdered? And are any of the other 7 victims connected to the Gilgo 4? Tonight, we are live from Long Island as we continue to investigate the Long Island serial killer.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight in our continuing coverage of the Long Island serial killer case. And, you know, we're learning stuff, right? We're finding out more, but there are still so many questions connected to this investigation, to this case, and to what happened on that stretch of beach in Long Island. And these are questions that may or may not be answered. Now, if in fact the accused killer is the one who did it, he's got all the answers, all of the answers. But if he doesn't speak, or if he's not the Long Island killer, or there's more than one, or there are 3 or 4, whatever the situation is, we may not get those answers. We may learn a lot more at a trial than has been made public already, although it seems some of the most significant parts of the investigation have been revealed in how they tracked this man down, the witness, the pizza crust, the DNA, the hair, the burlap bags, the burner phones. All of that information has, in fact, become public during the course of what the DA has spoken about. Well, we also know, where the bodies were found, obviously. We know where that took place, and then that stretch of beach. And that was the part of this case out there in Gilgo. That's really what started it all, right? There's a search for a missing woman, and then a body's found, another body's found, and then there's...
You know, there's a good potential that Rex Heuermann did not commit all of these. I sort of feel that he may not have committed Shannon Gilbert's case. But that was, as Vinnie Politan is saying right now, that was the catalyst that got the ball rolling, that got them searching this area and had them, in fact, find the 4 bodies known as the Gilgo 4. But there's a potentiality. Look, we have to, none of us know all the answers, and especially not all these talking heads on TV, or me either. Really, the people that are going to give you the answers are the investigators, the Suffolk County Police, Suffolk County DA's office, the FBI, the state police. I'm leaving somebody out, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. Those are the folks that are going to be able to give you the answers to this. But guess what? It takes time. Getting the evidence that they've recovered, and we spoke about going through the house and the storage facility. I would almost guarantee, and I don't like to give guarantees, but I would almost guarantee that in those search warrants and in the property they recovered from Rex Heuermann's house in Massapequa Park and the storage facility in Amityville, that there is property in those 2 locations that belong to the victims. Whether the property can be identified, that's all part of this huge investigation. And that is part of case linkage and what can link the bodies to the evidence. And that is the job of the detectives and the Suffolk County DA's office, the FBI, the state police, and the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. All of them known as the Gilgo Task Force are the ones that are going to build this solid case so that this man, Rex Heuermann, if he is in fact guilty, never, ever will see the light of day again.
Wait, we're on to something here. Then they bring in the reinforcements and start discovering a whole bunch of bodies. And you're wondering, how could there just be bodies strewn about a beach? Like, how does that happen? I mean, don't people go to the beach in the summertime? No one saw them. When were they placed there? So we know where they were found, but...
You know, what he's saying, like, the bodies weren't on the beach. They were, like, in the dunes. If you know dunes, it's high grass. People aren't walking through the dunes. So that's why they were not discovered. They were not laying openly on the sand. They were discarded or placed in the dunes, which is high grass, which is why if Rex Heuermann chose this as a dumping, and if he in fact is the perpetrator, that's why he chose it. And again, it's not in the open sand of the beach.
When were they put there? When? How long were those bodies found in the marshes and the beach in that area. Then you got to think about evidence. Where are you getting the evidence from? Is there evidence inside the accused killer's house? How significant was that search? Because you do the timing of all this, right? You're going back 13 years. So were there relics? Was there any sort of potential DNA evidence? Is there anything that links any of these victims to the house? Is there anything in the house that links to one of the victims?
Go Beach. Further down, about a 5-10 minute drive is where those victims' bodies were found, again in burlap, badly decomposed. And it's a very eerie, ominous place to be. It's very overgrown. It's marshy. There's reeds out in the water there. And it's just, you don't expect you would see anybody there, and you don't expect that anything would be found there if you were to look.
So here's what I'm trying to piece together, right? If you're going to do this in the middle of the night, no lights, right? You're going to need a flashlight.
Right.
I mean, you're going to need light to see where you're actually going.
This
you're
guy,
walking through what? Overgrown marsh?
He's obsessed with the flashlight. That's the last thing a serial killer is going to carry with him is a flashlight to light himself up as he's dumping a body. Where'd this guy get this from? I mean, he knows the area. He's going to pull over in the dark of night. He's going to take the body out of the car. And he's going to dump it and get the hell out of there. He's not bringing a flashlight so he can see where he dumps it. That's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm sure he's not watching me, but I'm watching what he says. I just think that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, folks, I think you got a pretty good idea what this location, what this Gilgo Beach location looks like. And again, it's a dark, unfriendly location. During the daytime, summertime, it's beautiful. Nighttime, pitch black, pitch dark. A place where someone of the ilk to commit a crime and to dump something or a person or a body, it's really a perfect place. And again, as Vinnie Politan kept saying, he's going to pull out a flashlight. No perpetrator is pulling out a flashlight. I never saw in my entire police career a perpetrator pull out a flashlight. But he said that. Anyway, folks, at this point, I always want to mention, as we come to near the close of this show, the victims. These are the victims that are known as the Gilgo Four. And Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. And we have to always keep them in our thoughts, our prayers, and their families too. And at this point, he's only been charged with the three, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. And they're expected to get the evidence very soon that will allow them to charge Maureen Brainerd Barnes. But at this point, they don't have the evidence. So just to mention, and I always like to mention the victims in all of our cases, because it's almost like if you don't, you're speaking about just a concept, not human beings who lost their life. And that's what we do on this show. And I want to thank all the new people that stopped by tonight. I actually didn't even announce this show. I just said, let me do a show. And I said, I gave myself a half hour, put it together, and brought it to you guys. So I want to thank all you guys that showed up and watched and listened attentively. And hopefully we can all see this case to its fruition, and hopefully with a conviction, if in fact Rex Heuermann is the perpetrator in this case, which I believe he is. There's a lot of evidence against him. And we'll watch as the next court case is September 27th. Folks, I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Have a great night.
One episode just ain't enough.